want you guys to meet Farmer Kevin and seed salesman Brian, and we're going to go through the story of them and dealing with data. So today, right now, Farmer Kevin's somewhat upset because he has a struggle dealing with all of his data and everybody he has to deal with and telling him to get his data in different places. So he works with fertilizer salesman Tim, which he's worked with for a long time to get his fertilizer applied to his field, who fertilizer Tim goes and gets his soil testing done by Soil Test Tina. Okay, Farmer Kevin also works with precision consultant Daryl, who helps him on some variable rate prescriptions and keeping track of some of his data. Okay, he also works with his equipment specialist John with some of his equipment, and his equipment specialist Casey's with some other. He has a long relationship with seed salesman Brian, who works with seed agronomist Mike to get lots of information on his hybrids and varieties. So Farmer Kevin is somewhat upset because he has to deal with all of these people and none of it flows easily to help him out. So his day to day. Right now, Farmer Kevin, usually in a meeting or on the phone, talks with seed salesman Brian, who then talks to seed agronomist Mike to get his information. Seed agronomist Mike and seed salesman Brian can communicate via their tablet devices, but that device doesn't sync up with any information Farmer Kevin has. The only thing he can get is verbal advice from seed salesman Brian. Okay, when he's working with fertilizer Tim then gets his soil test results from Soil Test Tina. Fertilizer Tim then goes and creates a variable rate prescription based on those soil tests, applies it to the field, and then sends a paper bill to Farmer Kevin along with some paper maps that he puts in a folder and leaves on a shelf and never looks at. He also has a combine with a yield monitor that equipment specialist Casey sold him. And for years and years, all that data did was sit on the yield monitor of the combine, and it got rewrote over once that data card got full. Okay. Eventually, equipment specialist Casey convinced Kevin to buy some software for Kevin to put on his computer to transfer his yield data onto his computer. The problem is that yield data just sits there on his computer. A couple years later, equipment specialist John came along and sold Kevin a combine with a wireless connected monitor. And this is great because we got rid of that pesky little flash drive that had to be moved around. So the yield data goes from the combine to the equipment manufacturer's cloud storage, and then it might get to Kevin's computer, but the problem is the software that he has his yield data on his computer doesn't sync up with the cloud. So now he has fields that don't have yield data for the entire field because he's combining the same field. Boy, Kevin is getting frustrated with data already. Alright, so then he starts working with Precision Consultant Daryl. Precision Consultant Daryl then writes him prescription planter maps. Okay, he gives that prescription to Farmer Kevin on his flash drive, puts it in his planter, and Farmer Kevin sees good results, but he never has any way to verify this because his yield data coming back from his combines doesn't sync up. He doesn't get his as planted data, so all this information is flowing through. Okay, Kevin also does a few other things. He puts on his nitrogen, but there's no data recording, nothing's recorded. So it just goes and he puts on his regular standard university prescribed rate of nitrogen. He also has a few fields with irrigation on it, but that irrigation just goes on. It gets turned on when he thinks it's dry or when on a prescribed schedule. So nothing really happens. So right now, Farmer Kevin has all of these operations happening. None of this data syncs up, and he's not really seeing any results from all of this efforts in precision ag. He has auto steer, his equipment drives straight, but that's about all Farmer Kevin has right now. So once again, Farmer Kevin has to ask, what is this data doing for me again? It's not doing anything at this point. So now we move on to the Advantage Acre future. So it starts off with the Advantage Acre cloud. So AgReliant Genetics through Advantage Acre is creating a online mapping platform to store Farmer Kevin's data in the cloud. What this allows is seed salesman Brian to give data from all of his plot studies, and along with agronomist Mike, precision specialist Noah, and plant breeder Tom to send lots of information to seed salesman Brian. Seed salesman Brian is able to then send all that information to the cloud. Okay? Then we also go and we take all this public data. So there's lots of weather, soils data, imagery data, which is public data or it's private data that can be purchased for a fee. So that's all put into our cloud. So what ends up happening is Farmer Kevin now, just to start with, before we add in any of the other pieces, is taking some of this data that he has This is what him ever adding in is. He's adding a little bit of knowledge. So this information that's coming, this knowledge that he has and information, and he's creating that into power. Okay, so let's go through and talk this a little bit more. So Kevin's planter now has a wirelessly connected monitor. Okay, he is now getting from seed salesman Brian seed prescriptions based on hybrid performance. So what the advantage of this is plant breeder Tom, specialist Noah, agronomist Mike know that every hybrid performs different in different soil types and just at different populations. We're able to then send that prescription to Kevin's planter wirelessly through the Advantage Acre cloud. Even better yet, that as planted data is able to come back to the cloud for Kevin to verify that it actually did what it was supposed to do. Okay, we can also, in some cases, let's say Kevin doesn't have his wirelessly connected planter, we can do the flash drive just the same. You move it to Kevin's computer and you move it to the cloud. Okay. Now, what we have is Kevin's combine that he had before that was going to the equipment manufacturer's cloud and it wasn't syncing up. Now, Farmer Kevin can give permissions to his equipment manufacturer's cloud to send it to the Advantage Acre cloud. Now, that data can be in one consolidated place. Okay, he still has his other combine with his yield data that he's moving with a flash drive. Okay, he can move that to his computer and easily sync it up to his computer to the cloud. Now we're going to even simplify it even more, dealing with his fertilizer retailer. Okay, so his soil testing lab then sends the soil test results to the retailer cloud. Okay, to their computing service. Once again, Kevin gives his fertilizer retailer the permission to share that with the Advantage Acre cloud. Now the soil test results and the as applied fertilizer data can all go back into the cloud. Okay, even further, the cloud, we can go and send some of that data back to the retailer cloud, some of that yield data. So then we can make fertilizer maps not only based on soil test results but actually based on crop removal. Next thing is we're going to putting on our nitrogen. So before, our nitrogen was just going on that university rate. But as we found out, if you raise your seed population or you lower your seed populations, you're changing what your yield outcome is. Okay. Also, all hybrids don't respond exactly the same to the same amount of nitrogen. So based on that now, we can then send a variable rate prescription to Kevin's nitrogen applicator. He can apply variable rate nitrogen. So increasing his rate some places, decreasing other. We can then send that as applied data back to his computer for validation. And finally, in the future piece, we're having here irrigation. So we can go and put moisture sensors on his irrigation units. We can then send irrigation prescriptions out via the cloud to his irrigation system. So we can control, so make sure he's only watering when it's at most needed. So, in the future, what we're having is we take the farmer data, we take public data sources, and we put it in the cloud. We take AgriLion's extensive knowledge of our genetics that we have for all of our corn and soybean hybrids and varieties. Okay, this knowledge is passed to our seed salesman. Okay, Farmer Kevin then gets this information. Okay. So we go from data to knowledge to information to giving Farmer Kevin the power to really make informed decisions using all of this data instead of just being in random places.